So I think it's coming up, yeah.
Anna, we're good to start. If you want to start. Or are you waiting for Anna or Linda?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see Anna anymore, but I think we should be okay, right, Linda?
I think it should be okay. If she has any announcement, will be only for prizes. We will post in chat. If anyone, keep an eye on the chat. We will share the links with you so you can take advantages of the prizes.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. So this is a session on ethical ML and AI, how to make inclusive and innovative products. And don't worry, I'm not going to be the person who's going to be talking for the next hour or so. No, I have a good group of people because most people have already heard me talk for the last 90 minutes. They're probably bored of me by now. But I'm joined with Wendy from Cantor, and she'll have some really interesting insights to share with us today. And then we have a really awesome panel that we'll introduce in some time. So let's look at the agenda for today. So we are going to first start with an overview. So what is ethical ML and AI? We'll talk a little bit about the examples that we're seeing across the industry, in different organizations at the moment, and what are the different challenges that these organizations are facing. Then Wendy will talk a little bit about the history of bias and how it has really existed for years now. And then we'll get into the panel discussion where you'll hear from our All Stars panel on their experiences noticing bias in their work and how they were able to overcome or find solutions to those. And then we'll end with a conclusion and share some resources with you. And then we'll keep a few minutes for Q&A. So what is ethical ML and AI? So essentially, ethical ML and AI really, is concerned with four areas, right? So one, we are looking at employees, we're looking at businesses, customers, and society. Okay, so let's look at it again. So ethical ML and AI is essentially the practice of designing, developing, and deploying AI with good intention to empower employees, businesses, and then impact customers and society. Now, the result of doing this, so if organizations embrace ethical ML and AI, the result of this will be that it will allow companies to engender trust and scale AI with confidence. So that's the definition of ethical ML and AI. There are some really big words in there like trust and scalability, and being fair, so fairly impact customers and society, right? So we'll deep dive into some of those words, in the upcoming slides. Now, the need for this at the moment is because, unlike a few years ago, where AI was never really a focus area for a lot of organizations, but now 83% of businesses believe that AI is a strategic priority for their businesses today. So if you were to just look all around us, the devices that we use, the apps that we use, they all have AI built in somewhere. They're using AI to make smarter decisions, right? So think of the smart refrigerator that you have in your kitchen. Yes, it has IoT, but it's also using AI to make a smarter decision. So AI is all around us. Now, all we need to really work on is making it ethical. Now, let's look at some of the examples that I mentioned. So starting with the left top corner, right? So we have IBM, okay? And before I get into, the examples itself, let me talk a little bit about how companies are already, leveraging data and AI to kind of create these solutions. But they're also kind of scaling their reputation, their regulatory and legal risks that they have when they use AI. Okay, and that's why it becomes important to have some form of ethics built in there. So looking at looking at IBM, sorry, City of LA actually is suing IBM because they used some of their data from the weather app, and it kind of, whatever data they were collecting from it, it was actually misappropriating it. So that is a challenge that IBM had. Going next to Amazon. So Amazon actually had to discontinue the AI program that they had. So they had an AI tool which they were using for recruiting. Okay, and what that tool they discovered was that the system was actually biased against female applicants. Okay, so that was again built in. The bias was built into their tool, so they actually had to get rid of that. Okay, so that was back in I think October 2018 sometime. And when it comes to Optum, so they are again being investigated by regulators because they created an algorithm that actually recommended that nurses and doctors pay more attention to white patients against sicker black patients. So again, you can think of that bias is built into the algorithms itself. And going next to Facebook. So Facebook has had a lot of challenges, when it comes to their use of AI. And one was, of course, the Cambridge Analytica scandal that happened, a few years ago, where they ended up sharing a lot of data. The other is the ad serving platforms that they have, where the algorithm actually tries to advertise or tries to advertise content to certain users based on gender and race. So this again ties back to the whole US election that happened a few years ago, right? Where they were kind of getting these targeted ads. And so they were using that data to, really kind of influence the election back then. The other one that they noticed, where it was actually Facebook was getting investigated, was because they were using a tool for what is called as a recidivism tool. So that really is about when there is someone who has already committed a crime at some point and is likely to kind of relapse or commit another crime later on. So what they use is they use this tool to identify such people, but the algorithm was designed in such a way that it was actually biased towards black defendants. So again, there's an investigation going on to identify, what we can do to either eliminate that bias or just scrap it and start from scratch, something like that. So that's Facebook. Now going next to Goldman Sachs. So again, Goldman Sachs had regulators going after them because they had, so they had this credit limits. Yeah, so this is an interesting story. So they had a tool for actually issuing credit limits to their to whoever applied, and the algorithm that they were using, they found that it was actually discriminating against the women. So this was using the Apple cards, right? And it was discriminating against the women and giving them lesser credits than the male people that applied, right? Or men that applied for it. So again, that is another place where Goldman Sachs, started getting investigated by regulators for using algorithms that were, biased towards or biased against the females that applied. And the last one is Google. Again, Google also had its fair share of challenges. So they had, one was the Department of Defense, which actually raised some of the ethical concerns. So they had issues with like renewing the AI contract that they had given. I think as of 2016 or something, I think they had to actually completely scrap that and kind of go with a different provider because. Again, there was bias that existed in these algorithms, and nobody really noticed it prior to that time. So yes, these are some of the challenges that organizations face when they use AI. And to be very honest, AI is not going anywhere. It is there. It's going to be all around us. Like I mentioned, it's even in our refrigerators in our kitchen right now, or even in the devices all around us. So it's here to stay. But what we need to really do is to make sure that it doesn't have bias. It is ethical, and so that's some of the examples of the organizations that we're seeing right now. With that, yeah, let me pass it over to Wendy, who will talk about the history of bias.
Thank you, Divya, and good evening to you, and hello to everyone. Um, Before I start with the history, I just want to mention our communities in Latin America and India, which are struggling with another wave of the coronavirus. And just wanted to say our hearts go out with you and hope that, cases start to drop soon. And we all grieve with those who's lost someone and wish for a quick recovery for anyone battling this now. Um, so, to give a history of bias, I didn't quite know where to start, but I went to some famous stories. And so I started around the 1970s. And at the end, we have some resources. So if anyone is interested in reading further about these stories, just give a little brief outline. We all have biases, and it's just part of what makes us unique as our diverse life experiences. We live our lives and bring these experiences to work with us every day. And that's why we get together in groups and learn from one another. People are different from one another. I myself am an advocate for accessibility. I've seen it as an important link in design. To understand diversity is understanding who is actually using the product. And I've been a caregiver for someone who experienced a traumatic brain injury, or TBI, for the last 15 years. And I follow how they cope and use things. And being a hardware and software engineer, I became curious as, what makes things as inclusive as possible. And this is at the heart of why I like this discussion today. And I hope we have some young professional data scientists as well as senior engineers in the audience. But this is for everyone to think inclusively about bias and how you have a role to help bring it to the surface so that it can be solved. So just like with information security, I see it as everyone's responsibility to become aware. So we've all learned when people come from a similar background, school, lifestyle, culture, when you don't consider differences of people, we miss things, and sometimes very important things, and even life and death things. Can we have the next? So my examples for today are seat belts, soap dispenser, facial recognition, and then the coded bias documentary. Next, please. So back in the 1970s, the first crash test dummies were built around what was called the 50% adult male, 5'9", 170 pounds. If a person driving the car or in the front seat did not meet these parameters, the outcome they had was they were not very well protected. Since then, they've learned to develop test cases for adults of varying height and weight, shorter, lighter people, even a 6-year-old child, a 10-year-old child, 12-month-old infant, or a newborn infant. So this article about these details is included at the end of our talk. Next slide. So I'll skip a few decades and come a little more current with a well-known story about hand soap dispensers. And they use this near infrared technology to detect hand motions, and the invisible light is reflected back from the skin and triggers the sensor. But it was not picking up all skin tones. And while soap dispensers are an example of an inconvenient, the same problem has also been documented in fitness trackers and heart rate monitors, and there's much more dire consequences to those things not catching this. Next, please. So the issues in the data collection, and there's nothing more striking to give examples of this than facial recognition. There's a saying, you can't measure the warmth of a smile, but we are trying to with facial recognition. There is a trending documentary called Coded Bias, and it has the latest evidence bringing awareness of errors, more than just inaccuracy, but errors built into our algorithms. We have the next slide. It's in our algorithms, our machine learning, our artificial intelligence. It continues through the life cycle of the software. So Coded Bias explores the fallout from an MIT Media Lab researcher, Joy, and I'm not probably going to correct me, please, if I don't pronounce this, Welamwini, discovery that facial recognition does not see dark skin to push the first ever legislation in the US to govern against algorithms that impact us all. If we do catch bias, most engineers are eager to log a bug and correct it, but the bias is everywhere, not just written in code. have you ever been in a meeting where you've heard something and it just made you stop, like someone interrupting another person? Next, please. This is one of the examples from the movie about accuracy. Next. So with that, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Rose Robinson. Rose is a technologist for more than 25 years, executive director for the Center for Minorities and People with Disabilities in Information Technology, founder and chair of the Industry Advisory Board at Savannah State University Computer Science Department, and was a senior director, Women in Tech Evangelist at AnitaB.org. I think that's where I first met you. And is also a breast cancer survivor. So welcome, Rose. Hi, I think you're muted.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm so happy to be part of this conversation. I also want to introduce our panel today as well, and maybe they can just come on screen one at a time as I'm introducing them, if that can happen. Charity Garcia, she is a software engineer at New York Times. She's also the founder of Black and Latinx in Technology at the New York Times. She's also an advocate who helps people break cycles through technology. So she definitely has some great insights into this conversation today. The next person on the panel is Cruz. Hi, Christian. It's been a while to see you. But Christian is a senior quality engineer at Lyft. She's worked at Microsoft, Etsy, and Grubhub before. She also volunteers for Habitat for Humanity, Black Girls Code, and Anita Borg. So welcome, Christian. And our third panelist is Lee Deminer. She's a security researcher at Intel, writer and public speaker for all things technical and diversity and inclusion, advocate for underrepresented communities in tech, volunteer at the Trevor Project, suicide hotline for LGBT youth. So welcome to all of our panelists. And thank you so much for joining in this important conversation. I think if we can do is just maybe perhaps bring everyone on screen, and then I'll ask the questions. So to get started, one of the goals for the conversation is, as Divya mentioned, AI is here. And we want to talk about the evolution of AI, and I'm glad we had a history of the biases first. But it really is up to us, and we each has a responsibility to contribute to how AI is going to impact each of us, but society as a whole. So I'm glad that we're having this particular discussion. So thank you all for being available and contributing today. So the first question I'd like to point out to, I guess to pose to the panelists is, let's talk about the biases first. Have you experienced, what type of experience you've had with particular biases, and if you can share, and then any aha moments at work or in your personal life, and it doesn't have to be tech related, but anything that you can share and you feel comfortable of sharing of your experience. So let's tackle the bias first. And maybe I'll put it to you, Charity, first. Thank you.
Hello. Yes, I've experienced bias. You know, of course, there's the soap dispenser, but like on a more, I guess, day-to-day level, I am house hunting with my husband. And there was this real estate agent, because it's COVID, there was a line outside, and it looked like they were all like either white people and like one Asian couple. And I was at the back of the line, and she went to everyone in front of me and she gave them a paper, which were the COVID disclosure forms. And then she said to me that she'll come right back to me. And then she proceeded to walk inside, and then she stayed in there for 10 minutes, peeked outside, went in there for another 5 minutes, peeked outside, did not acknowledge me at all. And, you know, that's just one of the things that we have to deal with. It's also part of redlining. And unfortunately, who knows if we're experiencing this in our apps. So, you know, as it relates to technology now, even with, you know, you getting mortgage rates that are higher because you identify as a person of color and they have that information and they're sending you higher mortgage rates than they would somebody that's not a person of color. So it all intertwines to the systemic racism that we're trying to fight now even more, and that we have been fighting for years. And yeah, that's part of my story.
Thank you, Charity. I appreciate you sharing that too. And that really is a and especially it probably was heightened in this pandemic area as well. And we've seen a lot of different examples. Christian, do you have any specific examples that you would like to share as well?
Sure. I can give an early work example. My first industry job is actually an intern, and I interned at Microsoft. And my very first big meeting, I walked into the room, and it was a very white room, and I was asked, was I lost? And I like looked around, and I was like, I shouldn't be lost. My office is right across the hall. Like, I'm pretty sure I belong here. But just the assumption that I wasn't in the right place was very interesting. Yeah, so that was my very early experiences with bias at work.
Thank you. And Mickey, I love that the fact that you're you know, a huge advocate for minorities and underrepresented groups in tech, and anything that you can share as well, because I think that has elevated in just the past year. We've seen a lot of exposure of inequities in every aspect. So maybe you could share something that maybe you've experienced personally from at work or in personal. Yeah, you have to unmute yourself. No, we can't hear you. I think it's just,
got it.
There you go.
My mouse disappeared off the screen, so I couldn't find it. So anyway, yes, I thought I would give a personal one since we've had two examples of workplace bias. I very recently in the last year spent 9 months in treatment for my eating disorder. And I actually spent time in residential treatment. And the thing that really shows up in the way of bias there is that almost all treatment is geared around cis white women. And it is directed, you know, that you know, men cannot have eating disorders. If you're of a certain BMI, you cannot possibly have an eating disorder. And yet it was something that was so evident in every single aspect of treatment that I just kept telling them, you know, you cannot expect me to behave like a cis white woman because this isn't how I was raised. And so, you know, it's everywhere. It's pervasive.
I totally agree. I think some of the inequities that I have seen over time, there's been a lots of bias against gender. Education has just heightened with the pandemic and being out of school and being at home and working remotely. Let's stay at your biases just for a minute, okay? Your experiences. What do you feel could have been different, and how that difference could impact in a much better way in your, you know, just something that could have been very, very different that you have, that may have just, you know, kind of swayed you and say, hey, you know, I feel included. So something that's really specific around that. And so Christian, maybe I'll start with you first, and then Mickey, and then Charity. So with your experience at work at your intern.
I think just like, hey, here's an empty seat. If I'm lost, I can tell you or ask questions, but just assuming that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time made me wonder, like, am I in the wrong place? So just extending like here's an empty seat, here you go, could have just gone a little differently for me.
Yeah, exactly. And Mickey, maybe and sometimes bias is unintentional, right? We think you know better, this should be better, but maybe it's just the fact that not a lot of people, this is what they are exposed to. Each one of us have a bias. So Mickey, maybe what would have been different, or what could you have seen, or the staff there could have been different, done something differently to really explore what kind of impact they were having on their patients?
It's a very good question, because as you were saying, cognitive bias is kind of built into us. I mean, no matter what, everybody experiences it. But I think it could have been started. I mean, they shouldn't be in this position right now. They should already understand that, there are differences. And I think one of the first things they could have done was gone through all of their documentation, because every time you read something, it was all directed at she, or her. There was nothing in there for, LGBTQ people, nothing in there for non-binary. It was all directed at she, her. Mm-hmm. And it was really unfortunate to see how it played out with a lot of people that were there.
Yeah, and you know what? That could have a deadly impact.
Yes.
And we don't think about that in the work that we do. It really could impact people's lives. And I think that's the seriousness and the discussion we really want to, capture here. Charity, maybe with your experience as well, what could have been different, and what kind of impact do you see having in a positive way, something that we see in society right now, and we're all trying to work to create that change?
Well, the difference is that we're all humans and treat us the same. Like, I never met this person in my life. I'm pretty sure she probably never met most of the people in front of me before. Just treat us all the same. And, if a person gives you a reason to treat them a certain way, then okay, but you can't just go into meeting somebody and having these biases against them and treating them unfairly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. One of the things that I have kind of just watched over time is the fact that there's a lot of research that's happening around there, right? Lots of research around just happening from AI to gender bias. I mean, some of the things that we're actually looking at is really how this is going to be actually impacting society, your personal lives, and your experience. Do you feel that, when we're talking about the biases of what you do on the products, how is that impacting you in your daily work at New York Times, at Lyft, and at Intel, and your job? How do you feel like that's going to help you produce better products or test products much, much better with AI and those biases as well? And Mickey, do you want to start first, since you're in the
Sure.
research area? So that'd be great to have your perspective.
Yeah. So as you just said, I'm a security researcher at Intel, and we do a thing when I work on offensive security and also defensive security. So trying to teach people how to do things correctly. one of the things we do, we call threat modeling, which is where we try to find every single threat that can be found in the software. Well, we also started doing things where I suggested that we do modeling of our diversity, right? So looking at, okay, who do we have on this team? Who don't we have on this team? What do we need on this team? And by looking at each and every one of those and bringing them in and then asking the question again. Now, it makes for a little bit larger team, but it also got enough of the voices in that we needed to hear in order to do a product that is correct. You're on mute.
Thank you for that. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Charity, what is some of the things that you can do at work to fight against that bias? Are you all at New York Times, what are some of the solutions that you're trying to work on to make sure that we have a very inclusive product that's coming out?
Well, luckily, the team that I'm on, which is the cooking team, has really great leadership, and they're really open to those hard talks about DEI. So even in our product, where we're talking about like adding more diversity, so that way we can kind of not escape from the New York Times, gray lady, but also keep up with the diversity that is surrounding New York City and surrounding our headquarters. So one of the projects that we have had, which was accessibility and making our website more accessible for people who are not able to actually see the website. And as you know, in tech debt is not something that's always exciting, but that is something that needs to happen. Accessibility needs to be number one, and being able to allow many other people, no matter who they are or what they're going through, experience our product. That's what's been top of mind. So luckily we have leadership that enforces that, and we've been able to translate that to our product.
That's amazing. Thank you. And we'll do a little turnaround on what that means of leadership as well, involvement. And Christian, and I love this panel because we're coming from Mickey has the research and Charity is an engineer, and now Christian, you never put out a product without going through QA. So how can you, Christian, as a quality engineer, how can you catch right before getting it out and really educating the engineers as well that only has that maybe that tunnel view and vision of their work?
Yeah, like for me, it's at a lot of different levels and a lot of different places, but one of the starting areas is just diversity of talent, right? So with testing, we are supposed to be catching a plethora of things, but it helps to have like various perspectives and various viewpoints, which kind of like helps to have a diversity in various talents, whether it's market, whether it's international, whether it's otherly abled. Just having people with different experiences looking at like products before you put them out there helps a lot. Another important thing is this practice of a pre-mortem. It sounds similar to what Mickey mentioned about like kind of this threat security testing is like we kind of look at things and say, well, here's what we're talking about. Now let's look at it and kind of like see what can go wrong. Like what can go wrong with this thing that we're about to unleash onto the world. And it's open for everyone in the room to kind of poke holes at the thing that we're about to deliver. And I think it helps because it includes not just engineers, it includes security, it includes accessibility, it includes tests. And so that diversity of not just gender or race, but of roles even within the company helps like everyone who works for this company, who cares about the work that we're doing, offer insight. So it's basically just as a tester, bringing people into the room and making sure a diversity of experiences and skills are involved.
Amazing. And the lack of diversity, it really does impact products, what you're putting out there, how it's impacting people's lives. I think we've seen that even with the, in the healthcare system and with all the pandemic, with communities not being able to have access. You have kids that are going to a Wendy's or something to get internet access when they are now tasked to be doing their schoolwork at home, and it's unequal. So that will be my I guess my final question as well, is that there is, artificial intelligence research has very little research in the group. What kind of impact does it have when these products don't, there's not diversity on your teams. There's not diversity who's actually testing the products in your test cases. And if you can share something, I know that you all are working at these companies, but maybe something that you can share at Intel or New York Times or Lyft that really has major implications for people if we do not include a really diverse team in the building of the product, in the testing of the product, and then also in the usage of the product. So can you speak to that? And maybe Charity, I'll start with you first. New York Times is big too. And I think we're all touched by it in some way. We read either a news or mobile app or some way. So anything that you can share would be ideal.
Well, as we know, what's been amplified even more in the news are the tragic killings of, Black people by authority figures, most of the time police. And the issue with this is that some AI is being used by police departments to scan in people's faces and, match them to what could be an offender or somebody is wanted, and increased interactions with police officers, as well as these AI having a high error rate, especially with people of color, that can be fatal. And, that's in the news almost every day somewhere, and somewhere in America. And it's detrimental to, I guess, our advancement within AI if we do not have those diverse teams, because there are real consequences to this, and people pay with their lives. And most of the time, those people are people of color, specifically Black people. So that's something that would need to change in this aspect, and something that should change, and something that should not be taken lightly, the lack of diversity in AI.
I agree. When Wendy mentioned Coded Bias by Joy Buolamwini, she also addressed the fact that we definitely are missing the people that are actually impacted by these tools and these products and these services, right? Or the lack thereof. And so that's really, really important. If we don't have, we actually partnered last week with PBS Independent Lens and talked about coded bias around impacting, communities that have food deserts, things like that. So Christian, can you share, especially in Lyft, because I have a sister who's blind, and I have two nephews who is wheelchair users. One is autistic. Accessibility, the disability community really has been overlooked, and they are truly an underrepresented group. And can you speak to that? At what are you all doing at Lyft as well, if you, anything that you can share?
Yeah, I think one of the things is what I mentioned about talent. I think they're starting to take a hard look. I don't know if you guys probably have heard of different ways they try to increase diversity, increase women, and increase Blacks and Latinos in work. But then we always generally tend to miss otherly abled people. And I'm always shocked when I walk into any company that I walked into, and it's like, well, we don't have anyone who's deaf. We don't have anyone who works here who's blind. Like, we just don't have their perspective, because as hard as we might try to come up with the perspective of someone who's otherly abled, if we're not otherly abled, we're going to miss things, right? Or if we're not like investing in third-party services to actually give us that help, we're going to miss things. So one of the things is really just in hiring the talent to help us represent the consumers that we're trying to serve. And then another thing that we're doing internally is the third-party services. We have a contractor that actually works, and that his sole expertise is accessibility, to kind of give us that like hard information about like, we are missing these things, or okay, just because a small percentage of users is in this particular category, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't like find ways to serve them, right? Like, because maybe if they like tell a friend that, oh, I had this great experience with this accessibility tool on Lyft, then maybe that category or that percentage of users celebrate the prophecy of like, well, if you serve them, if you build it, they will come. So that's another thing. And also internal trainings for all employees. They had some bias trainings specifically for managers. And while that's important and great, it's like, well, why everyone should take this internally? We should all care about our internal biases because we all have them. And so acknowledging that everyone has a bias. So those are a few of the things that I can share.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. That was great. And Mickey, so from a research perspective, right? It'll be interesting to hear perspective on what they're looking for, a researcher from a diversity perspective. You know, how are you all tackling diversity, or really trying to be more inclusive in, you know, in the products, or even in your staff as well? So anything that you can share with us would be great.
Yeah, I feel really privileged in the fact that I work on a team with 60% women. So I mean, it's not the norm. Let's put it that way. But as far as, you know, our biases, you know, cognitive biases kind of warp our sense of what's right and what's wrong, because our brain just kind of short circuits and says, this is right. So we need to be looking at intersectionality a whole lot more than what we do. And it's one of these things where I can't speak for a Black woman. A Black woman can't speak for me. And all of these changes, you know, the people with diverse abilities, I mean, people who are neurodiverse. We have huge groups of, huge populations within our companies that we're overlooking, right? And if we're not overlooking, we're certainly not serving them as well as we could be.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much. And I want to round out with, we have a lot of work to do, but I know that each one of us contributing to this challenge. It is a challenge, but it's not something that we can't provide solutions to. So I want to thank our panelists, Charity Garcia, Lee Deminer, Christian Cruz, for this incredible conversation. I hope that you all take what you heard here and really apply it and continue the conversations at your job, at work, or at even at home, because we have a next generation responsibility to them to make things better. So we're going to move, I believe, Wendy, into the Q&A section, or are we at time and we have to kind of wrap up? So you let me know.
Oh, yeah. Divya or Anna, we do have a couple slides. Just one more slide there, Divya.
Sure. Do you see that, Wendy?
Before the resources, I see conclusion.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Yes, I also would like to, thank everybody from the panel, and Rose, our moderator for today's discussion. I took notes. I really loved a lot of things that were discussed today. And then this is something when Divya and I were talking, you know, how to conclude, how did I feel? Inclusive AI is a path, not the only path, but to have less bias, is to try to be more inclusive. And I like to give the example of, You know, there's room in the world for stairs and escalators and elevators or lifts. I work for a British company, so I'm used to saying lifts. But they all have a purpose. And, you know, as in saying AI is here, we do need to get more than just a little conscious of what we're putting out there and how it affects people. So to go, if there's any questions, I sort of turn to Anna or Linda, how they would turn people's mics on, or
People's mind.
if somebody does. I
If
don't know
if
there's
anyone likes
raised-
to ask any question, or in chat, or in if they write in chat, I can give them the permission to talk. Otherwise, I will have to do all of them. 1 second. Let's see if someone I saw that wrote in chat. I have. Okay, thank you for being with us. I'm not sure. Anna has some issues with connectivity, unfortunately. So, if anyone likes to ask a question, please feel free. I'm turning on the permissions. I wish they have one that you can do it all at once.
the chat if you wanted to have your drawing or do your other things if someone thinks of a question.
Yeah, I think Anna has some issues with her audio.
Hi, I'm here. I'm here. Are we all set to move on, or?
If anyone likes to ask questions, and after this we will have the raffle, right? I tell you the truth, listening all this, how you call it, not talks, stories, no? I never could imagine that someone in such a position could encounter same problems that we human beings every day have to deal with. I was kind of surprised to listen all the stories. It's really sad. I was really surprised. I didn't expect it. So if anyone else likes to, and let's hope so that the AI having you in the field and giving contribution will not have to deal with the bias that we deal every day. So let's see. I see that our attendees are kind of shy. Let's see this. Oh, Mrs. Mickey wrote in chat. So maybe I will ask a question. I see that I wanted to give everybody else the opportunity, so I don't have to do it. What if you was in a virtual world, let's say in the AI world, what you will make better so these things will never happen? If anyone likes to answer. So if you was in another planet and you have to start all over, what you will make sure that this will be available there that is not here, all this toxicity? It's a difficult question, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't know what to how to say that everyone. Oh, go on.
Sorry, Wendy, go ahead.
No, just it's you could start on another planet, how to accept that everyone's diverse. It goes so against what human beings are.
Yeah. I see somebody wrote in the chat, and I was thinking of that, but I don't have children, so I could not speak for myself. So it says, sorry for interrupting you. It says,
Yeah, no, no.
I think it will be great to start with the children and teach children to be inclusive from a young age. I think that is really nice.
Yeah, that is going to be my thought as well. I think I'll teach acceptance, just accept people for wherever they come from, whoever they are, whatever identity they have, whatever backgrounds they come from, doesn't matter. Just accept people. I think that would be something that is so important, so that people feel comfortable in their own skin. And from there, I think, once acceptance is widely there, then from there, I think we can really focus on the problems that we're trying to address. Because right now, I think more than the problems, we have all these issues that, we are still working on. So I think, yeah, we go to start on a new planet. I think that might be a good start.
Actually, I can share one of my stories. When I was younger, very young, I was like a teenager. I remember that I had moments where not bias. I had moments that I met a person that I didn't like, no matter what. She didn't do nothing. I just see it and I didn't like. And later on, I was reading a book, and they was talking about that sometimes we don't like people even if they didn't do nothing to us, So I was reading, and I was trying to change myself, and I changed myself, and I understood that everybody is different, and sometimes you have that, like chemistry, not like someone you like just right away, and sometimes somebody didn't do nothing wrong to you, but I was very young and without brain, and but I changed, and I saw the benefits of doing so. Why? Because you can create so many friendships, you can meet people that are so different than you, and you can learn a lot from them, and which I took advantage after I learned about what I was doing, with my little brain. And I changed, and that changed my whole life. I made so, because I moved, I'm born in Romania, I moved in Italy, and then I moved to United States. So I met people from all over the world. I made friendships, and that changed a lot. So I think as people go to traveling and meeting other people, but not traveling in US, traveling all over the world, it will change your perspective of how you see the world, for what you live, what is your purpose, what is everybody else's purpose, and how to see the life with the different eyes. So I think that is the best thing that happened to me, So I really appreciate that happened to me. It happened even to me that others didn't like me, but that is different. It happens. I cannot do nothing. Not everybody can like me. I have to accept it. But at least I change, and I see the things differently. So I think first thing should start with ourselves, to be aware of what's going on, and try to understand why that happened. I could not really understand it. Why? That person didn't do nothing, and many times happened when I was young that the people that I didn't like at first, they became my best friends, and I could not understand. I says, and always when we meet after years, do you remember, I didn't like you at all at the beginning. I don't know, and now we are the best friends ever. I couldn't explain. So now it doesn't happen anymore. It happened. Somebody wrote in chat, says, I feel bias against someone, or in fact any negative emotion for someone subconsciously arises from our own insecurities. A person who is completely happy and satisfied with themselves will be highly less likely to see someone else differently and be mean to them. So yeah, making people happy with themselves will be a good start. Definitely, I totally agree. Yeah, that it changed a lot for me. But at the time, I'm talking many years ago, there was nobody was talking about bias, about, there was not all this, education around or courses that you could learn about it. It was just my, a feeling that I had, and I could not explain it. So, yeah, definitely. Anyone else like to share a story or ask a question? Otherwise, we will maybe send it to Rana. I don't know. In my case, so Rubenia wrote, in my case, it was taken me my entire life to open my mind and fight my own prejudices. Yeah, it happens. Sometimes I even biased against my own self. Yeah, that's true. Sometimes. First, we have to realize, and after we will change. Otherwise, if you don't realize inside that something is not right, you will never be able to change, I have things about myself that I don't like, but she says, and I have to change them. I think happens to everybody. Anna, are you here around? Do you still have?
I'm here and I'm ready to share my screen for the Wheel of Fortune. Unless you want to do it, Linda, because I know you are the one traditionally to be spinning the wheel. So I feel like that's your job.
But I don't have the access to the form names. So.
I shared the spreadsheet with you on Slack.
Okay.
I can do it. I just I know you like to do it, or that's not
you can
correct.
Do it.
Oh, okay.
Let
me share
our
my screen.
speakers, all of them that came here today to talk to our attendees.
Yeah, I can't thank enough everybody for taking the time and for amazing speakers. I'm sure GDG has monthly, even more events, and I'm sure I will see you very often. I will ping you again, trust me. And it's not just GDG NYC. Linda runs amazing events at GDG Capital Region, and we also do collaborations. We plan a Google I/O extended event for the entire Northeast. So I would love to have you very often. Let me see if I can share the wheel. Can you see the wheel?
Yeah, we can see.
Fantastic.
Click. What are we spinning for?
I'm sorry?
What are we spinning for?
This is like we always already learned. The prize is that everybody won is the Coursera Lifetime Access. This is a physical award, and unfortunately, we have a little limitation. We can only ship to the US or Canada. If you win and you're not in the US and Canada, we'll arrange for alternative prize. You can choose, you already got Coursera, so you can choose Udemy course that you like, or
how many times
we can figure something out. But I believe most people are from
I have the form here, and I will check it when you spin and you have the name. I will check the form and I will let you know.
Here we go. Our winner is Karen Yu.
Oh, congratulations, Karen. Give me a second. She's
Karen. If you're here, are you in the US?
Yeah, she is.
Oh, fantastic. So we'll be in touch via email to get your phone. Congrats. We'll need an address and a phone strictly for shipping purposes, not to stalk you or anything. Do we want, please share any closing thoughts, and thank you again, Rosario, Wendy, Charity, Christian, Mickey, everybody who joined today. Thank you for your time.
Can you stop sharing your screen so we can see some faces?
Here we go.
Yeah, so
Yes,
please take
that's it.
advantage of the Coursera free license from Atria Institute of Technology and enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you, Divya. It's wonderful hosting with you, and thank you to Rose and Mickey and Charity and Christian for joining and keeping the discussion going, because that's very important to keep the awareness.
Absolutely. Yep. Lovely meeting everyone. And yeah, enjoy the weekend.
Yeah.
Yep. Take care. Bye-bye.
Much fantastic end of IWD campaign.
Thank you,
Thank
Anna.
you, Divya. Thank you, Christian.
Sure. Bye,
Thank you,
Linda.
everybody.
Thank you, Wendy.
Bye.
Linda, you're the best.
Everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Linda. Great hosting.
Thank you.